Hey everybody, this video lecture will focus on block formatting and business documents. We'll start out with an introduction to the concept of block formatting, and then we'll look at some common business document types and how you can use them most effectively. So let's start out with an introduction to the concept of block formatting. Block formatting is the default formatting method that you will use not only in this class for all written assignments, but also in your broader business communications. It is the default method of formatting in US business. Block formatting is characterized by various characteristics, but I want to run through some of the most important. So first, and perhaps most importantly, block formatting uses left-aligned text. All text should appear along the left-hand margin of the page. You don't, in other words, use indents with block formatting. Block formatting also has a ragged right margin, which means that lines just end wherever they end. You don't have a clean line on the right-hand side of the page, only on the left. Block formatting also uses single-space text or 1.15x spacing. It uses full line breaks between paragraphs so that you're introducing extra white space between those paragraphs. It oftentimes uses headers and subheaders to signpost content to indicate to readers where they can find important information. And often it uses bullets or numbered lists to make parallel pieces of information easily and quickly scannable. Okay? Now, block formatting, this isn't just some arbitrary system. This is a technique that will give your documents visual appeal. It's what conveys to your reader that you've put time and care and attention into crafting and formatting your documents. It's also, for reasons that we don't need to talk about right here, the most efficient form of formatting. It's the best way to facilitate speedy reading on the part of our audience. So let's look at what block formatting looks like in practice. So here we have an example of a page of a document that uses block formatting. On the left-hand side of the page, you'll notice that left justified text. All of that text is aligned along the left-hand margin. This page also features ragged right margins. The lines just end where they end. We don't have a clean line along the right-hand margin. The page also features headers and subheaders to help our audience quickly and easily identify both the structure of the document and where they can find important information. It's got single-spaced text. It's got those full line breaks between paragraphs. And it's also using a bulleted list to make parallel pieces of information quickly and easily scannable. Now let's talk about some common business document types and how we can use them most effectively. The three most common business document types that you'll be using, not only in this class, but probably in your career, are emails, letters, and memos. And all of these different documents, they have different formatting peculiarities, and they also have different uses. So emails, letters, and memos, they primarily differ in terms of their header, as well as their opening and closing salutation, right? So emails and memos have to, from, date, subject lines. Memos also typically have the word memo or memorandum at the top of the page, whereas letters begin with the date when the recipient, when the writer is sending the message, followed by the audience's name and address. And then emails and letters, they have opening and closing salutations of varying levels of formality, whereas memos do not. Okay, so to summarize, emails and memos, to, from, date, and subject line, something slightly different for the header of a letter. then emails and letters have opening and closing salutations of varying levels of formality, while memos do not. To make this more concrete, let's look at some actual examples of emails, letters, and memos. So here we have a sample email. Don't pay attention to the content. It's just lorem ipsum filler. Instead, this is just an example of how you would actually format an email. So notice that you've got to, from, date, and subject line at the top of the page. You've got a relatively informal opening salutation in Hi Jane, and you have a relatively informal closing salutation with Best John. Next, we have a letter. We've got the full date written out at the top of the page, followed by the recipient's name and address. We've then got a more formal opening salutation. We've got Dear Ms. Doe. And then we have a more formal closing salutation. We've got Sincerely John Doe with John Doe's signature. And finally, here's an example of a memo. We've got the word memorandum at the top of the page. We then have to, from, date, and subject lines. We do not, this is key, we do not have opening and closing salutations. So that's how you format emails, letters, and memos. But next we need to talk about when and why and for what purpose you would use these different types of documents. So we're going to be talking about the differences between these documents in terms of their ideal audience, their level of formality, whether you can send this message internally within your organization or externally, their ideal length, and finally the expected response time. So emails, you can send that to one person, you can send it to two people, you can send it to a bunch of people, all right? The size of your audience with email can vary widely. With letters, on the other hand, you're really limited to sending that letter to one person at a time. You can, of course, send the same letter to a bunch of different people, but you still got to print it out, you still got to put it in an envelope, you still got to address it. It's very time consuming, right? So typically you're going to be sending letters to one person only. Memos, by contrast, you can send that to one person, you can send it to many people. It's very similar to email in that respect. And that's because oftentimes we attach memos to emails. So we're leveraging the characteristics of emails to send our memos. Emails are pretty informal. You don't want to use email for very formal communication. You want to use letters for very formal communication. And you want to use memos for semi-formal occasions, right? If you want your message to have a little bit more gravitas than an email, but you don't need quite as much formality as you would get with a letter, then go with a memo. Emails can be used internally and externally. Pretty much everybody has an email address, so you can send emails within your organization or outside your organization. Letters, by contrast, are more typical for communicating outside of your organization. The only times that you tend to use a letter internally are for very good or very bad pieces of news, whether it's to celebrate a hire or a promotion or to codify a termination. Memos, by contrast, are almost exclusively used internally. It's very rare to send memos externally. Emails should be short. Their ideal length is a single screen, on a laptop or a PC. Letters can be 1 to 2 pages in length. You can get away with a bit more length in a letter than you could in an email. And memos can be quite long. In fact, memos are probably the format that you would use for a much more robust, lengthy report or something like that. Then finally, response time. Emails, of course, you can respond to emails quickly because of that built-in reply function. Letters, you're most likely to get a delayed response. Even if your recipient responds to you via email, your letter still needs to go through the mail, which is, of course, a lengthy process. And then memos don't really have any built-in means of response. If you transmit a memo as an attachment to an email, people can then use the email to respond, but they can't really respond directly to the memo itself. So keep these pros and cons in mind as you're choosing the best document type for your message. And remember that block formatting is not just some arbitrary system that we impose upon you because we're mean. No, this is a very efficient way of formatting your document. It helps your reader navigate your document quickly and efficiently. And it's also what gives your document visual appeal. It's what signals to your audience that you've put time and care into crafting and organizing your document. Thanks for watching, everybody.